Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer on Cynthia Kane's truly transformative framework that's going to help you stop reacting and start actually responding. Look, we've all had those moments, right, where we say something and then literally immediately regret it, or we just find ourselves simmering in this passive-aggressive silence, secretly wishing the other person could just read our minds. Well, today, we're unpacking the core concepts from the book How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, which gives us a really structured, mindful guide to completely revamping how we connect, not just with others, but with ourselves.
But before we get too far into the weeds, I want you to ask yourself this one crucial question. Do you listen to reply, or do you listen to understand? Be brutally honest with yourself here. It's a really tough one. Asking yourself this helps diagnose your own communication autopilot, and it lets you see where you might be causing some completely unintentional friction. Because so often, we're really just waiting for our turn to speak, kind of formulating our defense in our heads, rather than genuinely absorbing what the other person is trying to tell us.
And you know, Cynthia Kane, the author of our source material, knew this exact friction all too well. She actually struggled as a highly passive-aggressive communicator herself, until a profound personal tragedy drove her to seek a more mindful way of interacting. She used to just go along with what everyone else wanted, she'd bubble up with frustration because her own needs weren't being met, and then she'd end up blaming everyone else for it. It wasn't until the tragic passing of her best friend that she had this massive realization. Life is simply too short to suffer through negative interactions. And that realization is what drove her toward the Buddhist principles we're going to explore today.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. Your default communication style. 2. Elements of right speech. 3. Listening to yourself first. 4. Consciously choosing your words. And finally, 5. The language of silence.
All right, part 1, your default communication style. Basically, what is your baseline? The truth is, most of us are operating on a background communication routine that we barely even notice. We pick up these habits from our environment growing up, almost like running this clunky old piece of software in our brains that we never actually chose to install ourselves. Notice the stark contrast here between the pain of being a cloudy communicator and the ideal, clear communicator baseline. A cloudy communicator is highly reactive, constantly exaggerating situations, leaning way too hard on passive-aggressive behavior, and suffering from a ton of negative self-talk. But our goal today is to give you the actual tools to become that clear communicator, someone who is responsive rather than reactive, deeply empathetic, and beautifully, clearly honest.
Moving right along to part 2, elements of right speech, and how we can use them to literally alleviate suffering.
But wait, before we even open our mouths to speak, we have to practice mindfulness. We need to pay attention to what we're saying while we're saying it and do so entirely without judgment. And that usually starts with just a simple, mindful breath to center your focus. You absolutely have to be anchored in the present moment to have any real control over what comes out of your mouth.
Okay, so once you're grounded in the present, you can start applying these 4 foundational rules of communication. These are what ensure your words actually create harmony instead of just unnecessary pain. Step 1, tell the truth. Step 2, don't exaggerate. That means you've got to catch yourself when you throw out those dramatic absolutes like, "You always do this to me." Step 3, don't gossip. Just don't do it. And step 4, use helpful language. Because honestly, if your words aren't helping, they're probably hurting.
To make this incredibly practical for your day-to-day life, keep this Sufi saying in your back pocket as your ultimate litmus test. Use it to filter literally every single interaction you have. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If you're about to say something that fails even one of those gates, just take a breath, back up, and reconsider your approach.
This is such a brilliant illustration of what happens when we lie just to avoid a little conflict. It's the classic scenario, right? Your partner does something, you're upset, but you hit them with the dreaded, "I'm fine," when you are definitely not fine. And because you didn't honor your truth in that moment, you essentially betray your own needs. So you get angry, you start acting passive-aggressive later on, and eventually a massive fight blows up where both people end up suffering. Honesty, even when it's super uncomfortable in the moment, completely prevents this toxic cycle.
Which brings us to part 3, listen to yourself first. We have to start from within. All external communication starts internally, period. Which means we must actively spot and release those negative, self-defeating narratives we tell ourselves. You really have to pay attention to your internal monologue and the feelings that those words provoke inside you. And most importantly, you need to see yourself with friendly eyes. Think about it.
If you're constantly criticizing yourself in your own head, how on earth can you expect to offer genuine empathy and patience to anyone else?
Getting a handle on that internal dialogue is exactly what allows you to make this major shift. A bodhisattva responds to the world. They don't react to it. A reaction is automatic, it's habitual, and it's usually super defensive. But a true response is mindful. It's balanced, aware, and deliberately helpful.
So how do we actually make that shift? Well, by actively observing our urge to just automatically react and intentionally taking a pause instead. In that pause, we treat ourselves with the compassion necessary to genuinely listen to others. That brief little moment of self-compassion acts like a circuit breaker. It stops the automatic knee-jerk reaction in its tracks and gives your higher brain a chance to formulate a true mindful response.
Now for part 4, consciously choosing your words. It is time to take ownership of our speech. Once we're finally listening properly, both to ourselves and to the person we're talking to, we transition into taking profound ownership of the actual words that leave our mouths. This is the very essence of mindful speech. It's about ensuring that the person receiving our message is way more likely to hear and understand us without feeling judged or attacked. It's recognizing that words carry a massive amount of weight and choosing them skillfully rather than just blurting out whatever random thought happens to pass through your mind.
To really put this into practice, you'll want to lean on the 3 C's: speak consciously, speak concisely, and speak clearly. Applying these 3 rules completely removes the guessing and the assuming from our conversations. It keeps our speech perfectly balanced and actually helpful. When you're direct and clear, you just don't leave any room for the other person's anxieties to run wild and misinterpret what you meant.
But there is a really vital boundary you have to remember here. You control your speech, not their reaction. Keep in mind that while you're doing your absolute best to choose your words carefully, you are ultimately not responsible for how someone else interprets them. You can be as incredibly mindful and kind as humanly possible, and someone still might get upset, and that's okay. Your only job is to ensure that your side of the street is clean.
And finally, part 5, the language of silence. A truly, truly powerful tool. Honestly, think about how you typically use silence. Instead of using it passive-aggressively, crossing your arms and just fuming in the corner, start using it intentionally to create actual breathing room in a dialogue. Mindful communicators view silence as a bridge, not a barrier. It's a deliberate space where understanding can actually have a moment to settle in.
Because healthy silence expresses compassion and intimacy. It acts as an incredible equalizer in any interaction, and it rapidly centers us right back in the present moment. Using little gaps in your speech to simply ask, "What do you think?" turns the whole conversation away from I and completely transforms it into we. It actively invites the other person to share the conversational stage with you. Now, the foundation that holds this entire framework up might actually be the most challenging part for a lot of people. We cannot ignore the role of meditation here. Meditation is what allows us to sit with ourselves, completely bare and accepted, which is what makes all of those previous steps even possible. It's where we practice that non-judgmental observation. Because look, if we can accept ourselves fully on the meditation cushion, we can absolutely bring that same calm acceptance into a heated, difficult conversation.
I really want to leave you with this fantastic quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. That which we persist in doing becomes easier for us to do. Not that the nature of the thing is changed, but that our power to do is increased. This entire framework takes practice. You are literally rewiring lifelong habits here. It's going to feel pretty clunky and weird at first, for sure. But the more you persist, the easier it becomes to completely transform your communication and honestly, your life. The clarity, the peace, and the deep connection you'll achieve, it is absolutely more than worth the effort.
So, the next time you feel that familiar hot flash of anger bubbling up in a conversation, just ask yourself, are you going to react from a place of old habit, or are you going to take a breath and respond with clarity? If you enjoyed this, subscribe to In 8 Minutes and never miss what matters.